Thanks for staying with us. This is SA Today with me, Unati Pagyasha. Let's take you now to this story that has been dominating the media. Tennis star Novak Djokovic walked through the Melbourne airport on Sunday after the federal court upheld a government decision to cancel his visa on the grounds that his decision not to be vaccinated against COVID-19 posed a risk to the country. Now, the Serbian player boarded an Emirates flight bound from Melbourne to Dubai, scheduled to depart at 2:30 this afternoon. Now, joining us to unpack this is a senior SABC reporter and anchor of SportsLive on SABC News channel, Thabiso Sithole. Thabiso, 11 days of court battles have come to an end, and the Australian Open will be without the men's world #1 player and defending champion.
Indeed, Unati, good afternoon to our viewers. Well, it was a unanimous ruling by a 3-judge bench which dealt the final blow to Djokovic's hopes of chasing a record 21 Grand Slam wins at the Australian Open after a roller coaster ride, as we said, almost 2 weeks of the in and outs at the courts, from his hotel room where he was held for immigration. This comes after the Australian immigration minister had twice revoked Djokovic's visa, citing that the tennis player was a risk to the Australian people. Remember, Unati, Melbourne as a province, if I can call it that, if I compare it to South Africa, has been under lockdown in Australia for more than 260 days since the pandemic began. So the people of not only Melbourne, but Australia as a country did not have much of a penchant of a hard lockdown once again. So it was basically inevitable that the Chief Justice, James Aslop of the Australian Federal Court, made this finding.
Now, Djokovic was seen at the airport and has since made his way out of Australia. In a statement following the ruling, he said he was extremely disappointed as it meant he could not take part in the tournament, which starts on Monday.
Indeed, Unati, but I think when you look at it as a totality, the first thing that the Australian government said, look, we've got rules. If you want to come to a country, you need to be vaccinated. This applies across the board. Initially, Djokovic was given an exemption, a medical exemption, because, well, he is #1 player in the world. He has not divulged his vaccination practices, but there's been so many stories that came out once he reached Australia. Firstly, he was supposed to be at a country where he was, in Serbia, at home, for the past 14 days before he made his way to Australia. Then reports came through whilst he was on a plane to Australia, where he was seen in Belgrade at a basketball match, which turned out to be a super spreader event that was on the 16th of December. Then on the 17th of December, he was in Spain at an event, again, tennis event, where he was taking pictures with kids wearing no mask. And at that point in time, Djokovic had returned a positive result for COVID-19. And then when he checked himself into Australia, he ticked no for having traveled, for having been in his country for the previous 14 days before he landed in Australia. So as I said, when the federal court made this decision by the High Court Justice, it did not mince their words in exactly how and why they felt that they will uphold the immigration minister's findings that Djokovic was he was going to be untrustworthy if he came into the country, and he poses a medical and health threat to Australians. Let's listen in.
The court considers it appropriate to make clear a number of matters about the process that has taken place. First, this is not an appeal against the decision of the executive government. It is an application to the court as a separate arm of government, being the Commonwealth Judicial Branch, to review the decision of a member of the executive, the minister, for the lawfulness or legality of the decision on the 3 grounds put forward. These grounds focus on whether the decision was, for different reasons, irrational or legally unreasonable. It is no part of the function of the court to decide upon the merits or wisdom of the decision. The orders of the court are: 1, the amended application be dismissed with costs, such costs to be agreed or failing agreement assessed. 2, reasons to be published at a later date. Those are the orders of the court.
Now, Nati, Novak Djokovic, as you've now heard, have since left Australia. He took a flight out via, to Dubai, and I'm assuming they'll be going back to his home country. The Australian Open will continue tomorrow. The lucky loser, Italy's Salvatore Caruso, has now replaced Djokovic. And the funny thing is, Salvatore will be playing against another Serbian in the opening match tomorrow who would have played Novak Djokovic at the beginning of the Australian Open. Bottom line is, the question now a lot of people are asking, Djokovic having been deported, bears a bigger question for the Australian Open. If you are deported from Australia, the immigration law of Australia says once your visa is cancelled, you then a 3-year you cannot come back to the country for another 3 years, basically. So Djokovic, as it stands, has to stay, cannot be at the Australian Open for the next 3 years because his visa was cancelled now. And the immigration law specifically states only if it is of importance to that country, to Australia, that any provisions can be made or for you to be coming into the country if your visa has been cancelled for 3 years. But the competition continues with or without the world number one, and that's where we stand right now. Nati?
And in fact, they say that you automatically receive a 3-year exclusion from that country, and it will only be under extreme circumstances and circumstances which are in that country's interest that they will then waiver this decision. Very interesting, Thabiso. I mean, initially as the scenes were playing out, one asks, one would ask yourself this question of, could this have been handled, differently? But then again, I think this, for all of us, was a teaching moment, most certainly.
Indeed, Nat. I mean, we've always had the question about what would happen if Thabiso then refuses to get vaccinated, for example, and the employer rather says, if you come into our offices in Auckland Park or any offices where the SABC, presides, you have to be vaccinated. This is probably a warning shot across the bow, if I can put it that way, because you cannot, go into another country. If they state that you have to be vaccinated coming in here, no matter how big a superstar you are, you have to abide by laws of that particular country. And bringing it back home, this debate has begun. It will be raging on for years to come. What happens if an employer says, if you enter my premises, you have to be vaccinated? And here we are. If Novak Djokovic had not initially lied about his whereabouts and his traveling purposes, most likely will still be playing in Australia because he had initially been given a medical exemption. So as it stands, he's back in Dubai.
It definitely does set a precedent. Thank you so much, Thabiso, for your time this afternoon. That is SABC reporter and anchor of Sports Live on SABC News Channel, Thabiso Sithole there. All right, well, let's continue.